Okay, so good morning, everybody. My name is Harriet de Sweet. I'm Managing Director of Brand Learning here in Asia Pacific. For those of us that have been here for the last day or so, we've heard a lot about what we need to be doing as marketeers that's different. We've not really heard very much about how to go about doing it. So that's really what I'm going to talk about today, and I think that's because that's really what's going to make the difference going forwards. But what gives me the right to do that and what gives me the right to be with you today? So I come from a company called Brand Learning, and we started sitting around somebody's desk in a garage in about the year 2000. And we're now a global business, which in August 2017 was bought by Accenture to accelerate our own growth. So how did we get from a team of 4 people when we started to a team of 170 now? And we really did that by focusing on performance of our people. Now, apologies for using my notes, because we've got some new research that I want to share with you, and I've not yet learned every single piece of it by heart for you, so bear with me. So what I'm going to talk about today is going to draw on some latest research that we've done, as well as our experience of working with a really lovely wide range of global clients that we're privileged to work for. One of the things that unites all of our clients is that they come to us asking about growth. How do we grow, and what distinguishes growth-driving organizations from those that are not? And why is this relevant for us here today? For much of our history, human success was directly related to the ability to solve technical challenges. These challenges are often complex in nature, but you can define them. They have boundaries that fit together to form a clear pattern. The trouble is, life's not like that anymore. Adaptive challenges are very different. Adaptive challenges refer to situations where there are no known solutions to problems, or cases where there are many solutions but no clear choices. Those of us that were listening yesterday to the session on machine learning may have been excited, but also slightly daunted by some of the things that Joe Flint and Google was talking about. As marketeers, answering questions like, how do we actually operationally deliver a differentiated experience? Much harder than when I started my career. It's nearly impossible for any one single marketing manager to solve adaptive challenges alone. They can only solve these by combining perspectives and by creating new ideas. One of the problems with adaptive challenges are the skills are less familiar. And so we often see people trying to analyze their way through them. But actually, to really solve adaptive challenges, we need to unlock the ingenuity of our people. So in times of accelerated change that we're in, building new capabilities is absolutely essential for your business to grow. And actually, our latest research shows and really puts a spotlight on the important role that managers play. Now, here's the thing, guys. When I use the word manager, I'm not talking about job titles. I'm talking about modes. I'm talking about the way of being. The role of the leader, of course, is about setting vision and about setting direction. But when we're thinking about ourselves as managers and being in management mode, we're talking about something slightly different. We're talking about how do we deliver that future? How do we actually make it happen? And it's something that we're seeing people aren't really talking about very much. So, quick, awkward question. Most of us in the room will have a manager of some description. Do you have a manager that cares about performance? Or put your hand up if you have a manager that improves your performance. Karen's laughing, which isn't a great step. So put your hands up if you think you've got a manager that improves your performance. About half of you. Okay, very good. Very confident hand raising from Chris in the front. Great, okay. Okay, next awkward question. What do you think your team think about you? Everyone's toes are starting to curl. Do you think your team think that you are a manager that cares about performance? Or do you think your team think that you're a manager that improves their performance? Hands raised. lovely, confident people, but somewhat less of you than in the previous group. So why this matters, guys? Because I'm here to tell you that if you're here to care about your business, to care about creativity and growth, you actually need to do this deliberately. Gallup shows us that managers account for at least 70% of the difference in employee engagement. And actually how employees experience work from day to day has a bigger influence on their motivation than their comp and ben package. Cheryl from Grab this morning talked passionately about bringing people into Grab and persuading them to join the organization even on a lower comp and ben package. And she was able to do that because of the roles that Grab plays in really engaging employees. And our own research says that only 18% of managers are actually focusing on people to grow the business. I kind of worry about what everybody else is doing, actually. And only 32% of managers are regularly, consciously thinking about how do we improve people, giving people feedback, giving questions, asking questions, encouraging reflection. So one of the things that we found when we did the research is that actually it's managers that are creating the conditions for great marketing to be done. And it's being done very, very inconsistently. So first of all, our jobs are harder than they've ever been before, and that's not going to go away. It's more challenging in matrix and virtual teams, and many of us work with people that we don't see. Many of us work with people that are physically remote, and everybody's workload is only going to increase. There is kind of an expectation as well that people just kind of know how to do this. So many organizations spend time thinking about leadership, and they build leadership capabilities. But what they're not doing is thinking about people in that transition mode when they're suddenly having to take on responsibility for people and really consciously thinking about that. So sometimes those leadership programs are actually coming too late for people. And there's not really any clear structure to support how managers lift performance. But what we found is that great managers focus very deliberately on doing things differently. And it's not just what they say, but very specifically how they behave that makes the difference. And there are 3 core practices that really good managers are doing to really, really make the difference. And we'll talk about each of these in turn. And I'm going to give you an opportunity to practice. So let's talk about role modeling. And let's start by watching a little video.
I love you. Maya. I love you. Yeah. I love you. Yay. I love you. Yeah. I love you. Yeah. Bye-bye. Yeah.
Guess how old this little girl is? She's 15 months old. Guess how many times that video has been watched? Like 6.7 million times. So we learn to copy from a very, very early age. So whether you realize it or not, people are copying you. And whether they realize it or not, people are copying you. So we need to make it really obvious as managers what should be copied. We need to make it really obvious as managers about getting out there and spreading the behaviors that we want people to deploy. We cannot talk about being customer-centric if we never talk to customers ourselves. It's not somebody else's job, it's our job. So what does this thing called role modeling actually mean? Well, there's a few components to it. So first of all, it's actually about explaining why the work matters. Why should we even be doing this? It's about explaining what's important. We've heard a lot yesterday about what we need to unlearn and learn, the new trendy language and capability building. It's really being very, very clear with people about the behaviors that support growth. And when we're doing role modeling for people, it's about explaining to them that that's what you're doing and about being really explicit for it. So here's a little example from Lynn. When she arrived at Visa, she had a very, very high-performing team, but she knew there was an ability to lift it further, and she really needed to shift the game on. And she worked very hard with the marketing leadership team to also unify efforts and to create a sense of a common language. And she did that through this really clear perspective and clear role modeling around why and asking those questions. So here's a go for you. In pairs, I want you to try this little simple exercise, which is to explain to the person sitting next to you how to tie a shoelace and why. 5 minutes, give it a go. Can you go with Chris? Okay, okay. Okay, guys, let's have a... It's weird. Okay, has everyone had a chance to give that a go? Yeah? Okay, folks. So the trouble with giving a room of marketeers the opportunity to talk is that you don't shut up, yeah? Okay, so Jeffrey, you said that was really weird. What was weird about it? Sorry to put you on the spot. What was weird about it? Yeah.
So for me, weird was, for me, the easiest way to explain how to tie a shoelace was to give Ika one of my shoes.
Okay.
And so we did it together. But first we started with the why, but it was like I've just handed someone a shoe. We've never met. Hello, would you like to hold a shoe?
Okay.
But we got there and it worked. And then but it just seems a weird thing to suddenly have to explain how to do something really simple and basic.
Yeah, and was it harder or easier than you thought?
It was easier than I thought, but it was just, it's the whole awkwardness to get into it and then go, okay, fine, let's just do it, get it done with. Okay. Then asked her to do it on her own, and then surprisingly, rather unsurprisingly, she could do it.
She managed to tie a shoelace. Amazing. Fantastic. Okay. What about somebody else? How did somebody else find it? Easy, difficult?
He explained it really well. I think he gave us benefits first rather than just do it and follow me. Okay. He said this is a reason why you should tie a shoelace because of the, you might break your leg or something. Okay. Okay. So I thought that was a good reason to listen to him.
Okay, very nice, thank you. So actually giving a sense of purpose as to what we're actually trying to do and kind of why. So one of the tricky things about this is that we sometimes get very task-focused. Just tie the shoe. And then, actually, some of those things work and some of those things don't, right? Actually, the reality is there are about 50 different ways that you can do it. We have huge arguments in my family about whether you take a lace and make it into 2 loops and then you knot it, or whether you do that tiny roundy thing and how you kind of do it on your actual shoes. But actually explaining why you're doing something and how you actually role model it really, really makes a lot of difference. Okay, let's have a look at the next behavior, which is around guiding. So this is really the practice about nudging and steering the team through challenges in order to get results. There's a few behaviors here that really help us do that. The first one is about understanding motivations and strengths. So Spotify do a really, really nice job at this. I can't claim them as a client, but they do a lovely job about really helping individuals connect their own personal values and their own personal motivations with those of Spotify. These values of Spotify may look generic, but actually to Spotify they're not. They're very, very specific, and they're very much owned by them and by their people. UCB are a really interesting example of this second behavior, which is about really deliberately designing purpose into working patterns. So it's thinking about the deliberate habits that we're creating for our teams. We've worked with UCB since 2010, and if you've not heard of them, they're a biopharma company. Everything that they do starts with a really simple question, which is about how can we create more value for people living with severe diseases. And UCB has gone further than most organisations because actually it now has completely restructured itself around patient value creation. And the key characteristic of their organisational structure is that it's much more connected. So no one person owns the solution. And this is what's enabling them to really solve those adaptive challenges that we were talking about before. A further guiding behavior is about feedback, so really consciously and deliberately increasing the frequency and the quality of the feedback that we give. GAP has created a new program called GPS, and the name is very deliberate. One of the things that they say about it is a GPS system doesn't wait until the end of the trip to tell you all the wrong turns you've made. So their Grow Performance Succeed system is about enabling a much more fluid employee and manager relationship. Employees set their own performance goals, and the GPS system that the manager uses helps direct the driver in the right direction. And then the final guiding behavior is all around asking questions. There are lots of different types of questions that we can use as managers to help guide behavior. Things like building relationships, things like revealing thinking. Here's a little example from a woman that I used to work with at Brand Learning who sadly left us to join a coffee company where she's having a fantastic career. She started putting into behavior some of these really core growth behaviors. And she found that asking why questions and really guiding her team through that released the potential of her team from much more junior and much more inexperienced staff than she had previously thought. So you should have been given a card when you came in. Has everyone got a kind of an A5 card that actually might have my business card attached to it, but that's not really the point of it. So you should have an A5 card there. And what we'd like you to do is turn to your new best friend next to you and have a think about some of those questions and choose a question to ask the person. Have a go at it and see what you notice about it. And do it in threes if you haven't got somebody next to you. Okay. Okay, everyone, are we about done? Okay, everybody, let's just pause for a minute. Okay. Okay, guys. So it's always lovely to hear lots and lots and lots of chatter. So tell me, what did you notice? Well, first of all, anyone notice anything about the noise level in the room? Yeah? Okay. What's got you guys talking so much? What's helped, if anything, apart from the fact that it's just nice to be nosy with people? What's helped? Yeah? You're looking at me like you know the answer. Go on, give it a go.
I think it's good that you provide a set of guiding questions for us to start the ball rolling.
Yeah.
So without this set of questions, we probably wouldn't know what to talk about.
Okay, okay. So it's a great point, thank you. So sometimes actually having some really practical stuff kind of, helps kind of conversations kind of get started as well. What else did you find about the questions? Yeah.
Besides the questions, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Besides the questions, to answer your first question, what got us going? First of all, I think the innate requirement to know more about the person,
Okay.
right?
Yeah.
And the noise actually helped, I feel, subliminally, because I thought I was completely honest about myself to her, and so she was reciprocating the same. It was not like an extremely quiet room with about 100 eyes, 100 pairs of eyes looking at her or me. So the noise actually helped. So that's insightful, actually.
Yeah, it's a great point, isn't it? That sometimes the environment that we have conversations with people in really helps. Having a catch up with your team over coffee in Starbucks is just kind of different than in the office, as well as the kind of questions that we're asking of each other. Yeah. What else helped? If anything. Any other questions felt a bit? Yeah, Sarah.
I think they were quite open questions,
Okay.
so you could reveal as much or as little as you felt comfortable to do.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably quite important in some of these guiding principles.
Yeah, thank you. I think that's right. So I think what we need to do as managers is think about how we have these kinds of conversations with the guys that we're supporting or the guys that we're in teams with, because it shifts the relationship a little bit. It shifts us from being very task-focused and starts building a bigger relationship and a space for you to have more of these kind of conversations. For some people, these conversations and these questions feel a bit awkward because they're not used to having these kind of conversations. Actually, my advice on this is simply to practice. The more that you can practice having the conversation and asking the questions, the easier it gets. Okay. So our last behavior is all about stretching, all about creating challenges for the team to maximize development and deliver results. And essentially, there are these 4 behaviors that our research showed really accelerated growth. Turning off autopilot is really very, very difficult. Challenging ourselves and challenging our teams to really look at things differently and change assumptions. And it's going to be a critical behavior for us to practice as we grow. Opening windows for people, giving people opportunities to interact with a much broader range of people across organizations with different perspectives. Really increasing empowerment, really increasing about how you can increase challenge for all members of the team. We were discussing over coffee about the MasterCard story from yesterday. They have 65,000 sponsorship properties globally. And the only way that as managers we can cope with that degree of complexity is by increasing empowerment and letting go of quite a lot. And systematic reflection. Given the increasing speed of work and competing challenges for attention, your role is to encourage the team to slow down in order to accelerate. So Nadella is often quoted as saying that we need a culture that allows you to constantly renew yourself. And he's inspired Microsoft's 124,000 employees, I think at latest count, to embrace what he calls a learn-it-all curiosity, as opposed to what he describes as Microsoft's historical know-it-all attitude. So really building that stretch in people to do things like genuinely opening windows, turning off autopilot, and increasing empowerment. So just a final thought for you. The difference between who you are now and who you were 3 years ago is due to how you've spent your time. What we practice, we become. So if you focus on improving your team by 1% every day, at the end of a year, your team would be performing almost 40% more strongly than it does today. And that can be the impact of consciously focusing on using different practices to improve performance. Any questions from anybody? I'm sure there's rumbling tummies and people wanting to go to lunch. Any questions or I have to sit down apparently.
Yep, any questions from anybody? Yep, this lady at the front, can we get a mic?
So what's your point of view on the onus on the manager helping drive an employee's career path versus the employee? Like our former CEO famously said, the only people who care about your career are you and your mom, and it's completely up to you, and a manager is there to help you kind of, unblock things, but it's really the employee's responsibility to figure out how they want to grow and where they grow, and then the manager guides them.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think it depends. If I look at all the clients that we work with and organizations I've worked in, it does depend culturally very much from the kind of organization to organization. If you take those manager practices, what we do as role models is super important in terms of helping people navigate careers and understand it for themselves. One of the beauties of marketing and the length of our lifespans is we're probably all going to do way more jobs than we ever thought. So I do think we need to own our careers, but I don't think it's an abdication of a manager's responsibility. I think as managers we have a responsibility to role model what career development and professional development looks like. We have a responsibility to guide people and to stretch their possibilities, because sometimes we don't know in ourselves actually genuinely how far we can fly.
Anybody else? Yes, this gentleman here in the red.
This could be an HR question, but nevertheless I'm asking. I had a fantastic team of UX designers, creative genies who can design as well as throw my one-liners to shame because they come up with better ones, which is fantastic. At the same time, some of my silver bullets, if I call them, are beyond Gen Y. They're Gen Z. They put millennials to shame in terms of their perception about work, right? Yeah. So Mondays and Tuesdays, they work from home. The rest of the week, if they don't take an MC, they come to work. But their output is fantastic, right? There's no doubt. Well, how do should I just accept it as it is, or should it, am I right to think that am I right internally to think that, okay, this is a pricking thing for me? I mean, we talk about everything, right? We talk about Adidas NMD shoes, we talk about, GoPro, using it in we have a ping pong ball in the office, ping pong table in the office. So it's all very conducive, very startup-like. I mean, we are a startup, so very, very startup-ish. Should it even bother me that sometimes, should they take it for granted? That's the question to you. Yeah. And number two, should it even bother me if they're performing equally well?
I think only you can answer that question, not me. Yeah? I think the reality of how we develop people and develop people's performance is changing. And I'm sure Cheryl next to you from Grab would have a clear point of view, as well as Varun behind you from AirAsia would also have a clear point of view about this. Ultimately, we do see many more organizations looking at output rather than input. And does it really matter whether someone's working at home in their pajamas at 2 in the morning versus being in the office at 9:30? Yeah? But we're also seeing some very old-fashioned employment models where we're expecting marketers and even marketing leaders to still kind of clock in at 8:30 and clock out at 6, and whether your jacket is on the chair or not matters. But I'm seeing that changing quite significantly. Really, it's for you to determine with your people and with your organization what's going to release their ingenuity and is going to release that performance. But Baron, I'd love to know what your thought is from AirAsia, just to put you on the spot there, because I suspect you might have an interesting perspective.
Oh, thanks. So you should be bothered, I think. But can you do something about it is the big question. I think being bothered about it is important because it is changing, and we have to figure out a way to kind of deal with the change. Well, that's what the new generation, that's how they like to work. The big dilemma that we have is how do you still build a culture that you want to build for the organization, where people start thinking and working together in a similar way when they really don't want to come in on a Monday or a Tuesday or a Friday, right? And they want to work alone and deliver great results doing things alone, mostly. So that's the dilemma. I think from a skills point of view, you get a lot of skills which are at the highest level possible. You get output from that perspective at the highest level possible. But how do you build organizational cultures in this new world? I think that's the big challenge. That's what we are also kind of struggling with right now.
So there's a lot of work that we do with leadership teams about helping understanding about discretionary energy and where that motivation comes from and how you release that. And you very rarely release it by having very constraining practices. But the tricky thing, I absolutely agree with Varun, is how do you release discretionary energy but still do it in a way that is in line with the kind of company you're trying to build, particularly as you're going through rapid stages of growth, which many of you are. Yeah.
We have another 4 minutes. We have a question at the front here.
Hi, Jeffrey from Auto in General. Harriet, you've been in Region about 2.5 years, yeah?
Yeah, very new, sorry.
Yeah. So I think it's still a reasonable amount of time. I'm just curious to see what your kind of view is on how the capability needs are changing in relation to people and process from the time that you arrived to where we're at today.
Yeah, it's a great question, thank you. So I think I guess if you look globally, one of the biggest areas of capability shift that we're seeing in marketers is a need to build more human and more behavioral capabilities. I was discussing this with Joe Flint from Google yesterday, that actually it's semi-impossible for us to keep up with technology. I mean, not completely impossible, but semi-impossible. And therefore, actually, as marketers, our role is to develop skills around creativity, around curation, around influencing skills, much, much more behavioral type skills. And what I've seen over the last couple of years is working practices and working cultures, to the question that was being asked, that don't enable those behaviors to flourish, where people are still being managed, very literally managed in a very, very kind of hands-on, kind of top-down way. So I think the more that we can release people and really build much more kind of behavioral kind of capabilities, the better. I've seen, from a marketing technical side, a lot of work going into building genuine customer centricity, as opposed to somewhat superficial customer centricity. So how do we genuinely shift an entire organization to being more customer centric as a key thing?
Any other questions? Okay, well, I've got one for you. Oh, sorry. Yep. Gentleman here.
Hi, Harriet. So, great presentation. Loved a lot of the points around even releasing the future of your capabilities through your people and things. Question around, so we know this is critically important. In your experience and working with clients, have you seen, is there something about particular companies who get this right? Because we know it's very important to do. but is there something in the DNA or the structure of the companies that actually put this into place? It may be top-down, it may be an HR champion, but is there something fundamentally that then makes this happen within an organization?
No.
Okay.
There is no one thing. We work with a very, very wide range of organizations, from small companies that are just out of startup mode through to huge global MNCs. The biggest difference is the organizations that take a strategic and deliberate decision to drive this, as opposed to picking off tactical pieces of work and saying, oh, we're going to send 3 people on a leadership program, or we're going to do a bit of an insight workshop here, or we're going to do a bit of strat and planning work there. Actually taking a strategic, holistic view about how you're going to shift an organization's performance is the single thing that makes the biggest difference in our experience. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
We've got time for one more quickly. Anyone? Okay, just quickly. How true for you is the old adage that people don't leave companies, they leave bosses?
Oh, what a great question. I think it's truer than ever, if I'm honest, but I don't think the boss is everything. Yeah, I think what we do culturally in an entire organization is more important than ever before, particularly because most of us work in matrices and very, very fluid teams. So the role of a boss or of a manager is important, but it's luckily not the only thing that matters.
That's a nice note to end on. So before we do thank Harriet, I've just got a few housekeeping announcements. So we've now reached lunchtime. So if anybody's looking for some more food for thought, at the innovation stage, we have a lunchtime debate that will be on bridging the gap between marketing and sales, lessons from Huawei, IBM, and Accenture. And you can also pick lunch up in the exhibition area as well. Seats at the debate are on a first-come, first-served basis, so do get there quick if you can. And we also have some insightful masterclass sessions during lunch as well. That's the theatres you'll be able to see is in the exhibition area. And then if you're back at the people stage at 2 p.m, we have a session entitled Creating Loyalty in an Age of Disloyalty. So either come back here or check the Mumbrella Asia app to see what else is happening on the other stages. So yeah, do thank Harriet then now.